witnesses. Multiple, as is often the case, as I'm sure you've figured out, there are multiple hearings going on at one time. So I've been running back and forth, and I appreciate the chairman accommodating me here so that I could come and ask questions. Thank you for the witnesses who are here remotely as well. I want to start with some questions about the anti-Semitic violence that we have seen, unfortunately, in this country, and seen a significant uptick of it over a period of years, but particularly in the last few months. This May, during the latest conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, we saw violence abroad that spilled over here domestically. Jews across the United States were reportedly threatened or physically attacked, and at least 193 different instances of anti-Semitic violence or threats during the first week of that conflict, which is remarkable. For example, pro-Palestinian protesters threatened, shoved, punched, threw fireworks in the Diamond District of Midtown Manhattan, which is an area with many Jewish-owned businesses. That led to 27 arrests and the hospitalization of multiple people. In Los Angeles, pro-Palestinian protesters attacked a group of Jewish men who were eating at a restaurant. While they attacked them, they waved Palestinian flags and hurled anti-Semitic slurs. We've even seen members of Congress, sadly, use anti-Semitic rhetoric. One member of Congress called Israel an apartheid state, said it was committing war crimes. Another said after the ceasefire that Israel's ethnic cleansing continues. Another congresswoman called then Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu an ethno-nationalist, fascist basically, during a speech on the House floor. This is very, very concerning. The violence is very concerning. The rhetoric from anti-Semitic groups is very concerning. The anti-Semitic rhetoric from members of Congress is very concerning and frankly inexcusable. So Mr. Fingerhead, if I could just come to you. You've discussed, I know today, and in your testimony, some of the despicable attacks that have occurred against the Jewish community over the past few years. Can I just ask you what role you think the recent conflict between Israel and Hamas has played or might play in exacerbating these violent attacks and this violent rhetoric that we're seeing in, unfortunately, too many places?
Thank you, Senator Hawley. I'm not sure I want to use the word thank you, but I appreciate the fact that you did recite some of the additional violent incidents we've seen in this country in recent months that I did not mention in my initial testimony. I think, sir, there is no question but that we have indeed witnessed a rise in violent extremism against the Jewish community in the last couple months that coincided with the recent, what was called Operation Guardians of the Walls war in Israel. And I have no doubt that that is also being reflected not only in the actual physical attacks, but in the threats that are being recorded by law enforcement and the threats that are being tracked by organizations like ADL and others. I know Mr. Goldenberg spoke earlier, my friend and colleague, of the online threats against anti-Semitism, which seem to unite radical extremists left and right. I seem to be unified in their hatred of Jews and of embrace of classical anti-Semitic tropes. And there's no doubt that we've seen that grow and a increasing attack on all and every Jewish community as a result of what has occurred the last couple of months. I do want to emphasize, however, Senator, that while I do think there's no question that there has been a dramatic increase in these last couple of months, that unfortunately it reflects a continuation of an increase that we have seen continuously over a number of years. That, as I indicated earlier, I believe since the passage of the Hate Crime Statistics Act, which Mr. Henderson spoke so knowledgeably of earlier in his responses to the panel's questions, that for 23 straight years of the gathering of the statistics under the Hate Crime Statistics Act by the FBI, the Jewish community was the religious organization singled out for the largest number of those recorded statistical threats and attacks. So this is indeed something that has been a rising threat. As I indicated also in my prepared remarks, we now have over 45 Jewish community federations that have felt the need to build professionalized community security initiatives to work with and mobilize each and every one of our synagogues and Jewish community centers and human services agencies. And we are in the midst of a national campaign to extend that umbrella everywhere. We are continuing to build the resources of our secure community network to work with DHS and FBI. So the increase we've seen recently builds on top of, unfortunately, a very significant rise over recent years.
Yeah, thank you for that. What you're saying, in other words, is that sadly, this is a trend. It is a trend of many years in the making, and recent events have accelerated it. And it's unbelievably sad that the security measures that you've just described, that so many synagogues and other Jewish communities, neighborhood communities are taking, it's unbelievably sad that these measures are necessary, and it's unbelievably wrong that they are necessary in this country. I want to ask you, just to come back to the events of this last May, this last spring, do you think that the current administration offered enough support for the Jewish community during the recent conflict? And I mean American Jews, the Jewish community in the United States. And is there anything else that, in a proactive sense, you would like to see the administration or Congress do? And here's where I'm going with this, Mr. Fingerhut. It just simply can't be that every time there is a conflict involving the state of Israel, that it therefore becomes okay to attack American Jews. It becomes okay to engage in anti-Semitic conduct publicly. I mean, that just simply can't be the case, because, as you say, we're dealing here with a long-term rise in anti-Semitic conduct. And the idea that, oh, well, we'll just say that it's anti-Israel and therefore it's okay. I mean, that we cannot possibly condone that as a way to see further, to excuse further violence, further rhetoric. So what more can Congress and the administration do?
Yes, Senator Hawley, first of all, I could not agree with you more that it cannot possibly be okay, and it is not okay that every time there is conflict between Israel and its neighbors, that it results in a rise in anti-Semitic attacks in this country. It is unacceptable, and I agree with you completely. You asked two different questions. The first was you asked about the response of the President Biden and Biden administration. I will say that they did speak out forcefully with regard to the increase in anti-Semitism that came about during this most recent conflict. I want to thank Mr. Henderson, Mr. Yang, and all the other civil rights organizations that joined in a forceful statement letter to President Biden. I believe over 180 organizations spoke out together at that time to the president, to the Biden administration, and the president personally responded within 24 hours to that letter. I also want to acknowledge the recent nomination of Professor Deborah Lipstadt as the special envoy for anti-Semitism, something that had been long sought by the Jewish community and that we hope the Senate will take up expeditiously. I want to acknowledge as well, also again with Mr. Yang, we were proud to support together with the Asian American Pacific Islander community and the Leadership Conference the No Hate Act, which recently passed, which will enhance the crime and statistics. So as to your second question, Senator Hawley, with what regard to what more Congress can do, I believe we've covered it to some extent, but I know that it's important to repeat because of the nature of this hearing, that we are nowhere near the funding levels necessary for the nonprofit security grant program. We need to enhance the ability of FEMA and the state agencies to work with faith-based institutions of all kinds to help them harden their facilities, and we need to provide the comprehensive designation necessary so that we attack this problem comprehensively. Senator Hawley, you know very well, and you've spoken beautifully about it on many occasions, the important critical role that the faith-based community and the nonprofit sector plays in American civil society. We are partners with government in every respect in delivering human services and caring for our community, in providing the emotional and educational well-being of our community. During the recent COVID pandemic, we partnered effectively with this Congress repeatedly on various funding and other strategic measures to make sure that resources got to the nonprofit and faith-based communities to secure their ability to continue to serve their communities during this terrible time. And now we need to do the same thing in a much more comprehensive way on the issue of domestic terrorism.
Thank you very much for that testimony. And Mr. Chairman, I'll say in conclusion, and again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your generosity here. But I just wanted to say in conclusion that I think it's vital that we are clear that anti-Semitism in any guise, whether it's from the right or whether it's from the left, or whatever its excuse is wrong. And as a person of faith, I just want to say, taking a stand on my faith, that it is wrong. It is morally wrong, and there should be and can be no excuse for it, whether it's wrapped up in a policy excuse or something else. But we've got to be absolutely crystal clear about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.